I'm joined now by partner at major law firm Thomson, Geer lawyers, Justin Quill. Well, you said it right here, Justin. Friday night, you predicted it, that Djokovic had a fair chance of being released from detention and retain that visa.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty happy with myself. I wish I had got a market on Sportsbet or something like that. I might say once I read his submissions on Saturday night, now that I think of it, demonstrating I need to get out more, I was even more confident. His submissions were really strong, and it was pretty clear to me at that point that it was going to be a bit of a slam dunk for him in court today. So I might say I didn't realise it was going to be as big as it was. It's a massive capitulation today, a massive capitulation.
So tell me why. What was the telling legal point? Or was it, as one paper reports tonight, a procedural error by Border Force at Tullamarine Airport?
It was certainly a procedural error. The orders that have been now made by consent accepts that the conduct of the Border Force officials was unreasonable. Now, that had to do with the timing. He was 25 hours in transit. He was told at 5:20 in the morning that he'd have until 8:30, and then he was woken at 6, or he was stopped again at 6:14 and told something else, and he wasn't allowed to have access to his lawyers, or he's at least pressured not to have access to his lawyers. So that process was found to, or agreed by the parties to be unreasonable. But the other grounds were far more legalistic, and they had to do with the technical test, if you like, that the Border Force officials applied or did not apply when they made the findings they had to find in order to cancel the visa. There's really tight limits on the procedures they've got to engage in under the Migration Act, and there's certain findings they've got to make before they have the power to cancel someone's visa. And the argument from Djokovic's team was that they didn't follow those findings. They didn't make those proper findings.
Okay, so does it mean that an unvaccinated tennis player can fly into the country tomorrow on a visa and remain unvaccinated?
No, it doesn't mean that. That'd be taking it too far. The difference here is, firstly, the reason he's won, that the absolute reason he's won is that procedural error. So in theory, the government could just go back and dot their I's and cross their T's and remake this order. But also the other thing that was really relevant here, of course, was the evidence that Djokovic had tested positive to COVID on December 16. Now, that evidence was unchallenged. There was no evidence put forward by the federal government, and of course, how could they? But there was no evidence put forward by the federal government that that wasn't the case. So you were stuck with this position, or the court was stuck with this position that you had to accept that as truthful. So look, if someone else flew into Australia unvaccinated, but they had just obtained a positive test, a month earlier, then possibly they could use this case as a precedent. Now, of course, the government could still turn around and, as I say, dot their I's, cross their T's, and remake a similar decision to cancel his visa. It would be a different minister. It's Alex Hawke, as we just heard a moment ago, the migration minister, rather than Karen Andrews, the Minister for Home Affairs. And I must say, I'd say Karen Andrews is pretty happy that she's handballed that. I should say also, I'm actually in the same building. We saw a vision a moment ago of the outside of the building that Novak Djokovic is in. He's on a different floor to me at the moment. Yeah, we're just seeing that vision coming up now. I actually went down to my car only a few minutes ago and saw that very scene we're seeing now, but from the inside. So it'll be interesting for me to try and get out of here tonight when I finally do.
You don't look like Novak Djokovic. You might be okay. Judge Kelly's comments early on in the proceedings were interesting. The point I'm somewhat agitated about is what more could this man have done? So right from the start, he had sympathy of the judge who'd seen their submission and, like you, was fairly compelled to find in his favour.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't look like Djokovic, and I don't play tennis like him either. But on your point, lawyers always talk about taking the temperature of the bench. And no doubt that the federal government's or the minister's lawyers took the temperature of Judge Kelly, and that was white hot against them. And that was pretty obvious. I thought that was obvious going into the hearing, that that's what was likely to be the case. Keep in mind, on Saturday night, an hour or two after receiving Djokovic's legal submissions, the government's team went to His Honour and asked for a couple of extra days, asked for this hearing to happen on Wednesday instead of today, and he knocked them back. So I think, looking back now, the writing was probably on the wall a little bit then. His Honour would have probably have perused the submissions, probably have started to form a tentative view, and that's not inappropriate at all, started to form a tentative view that there was something pretty decent in Djokovic's case. Then you get into the hearing, you have comments like that. It was pretty clear to me watching it today that this was going to go south quickly and badly for the government, and their lawyers would have known that. That, I think, is part of the reason why you saw the dramatic capitulation. Keep in mind, it's not just a capitulation on quashing the order, but it's also agreeing to payment of costs and an agreement that the conduct of the Border Force officials was unreasonable. So that's a finding that's been made in there. Interestingly, there are no other findings that have been made as to his exemption status or what have you. So they haven't agreed to that. They haven't tied their hands in making an order going forward. So they can still potentially do that. They'll have to follow a different process, of course, the right process this time. But look, it doesn't look good for Australia on the international stage. That is the only certainty in this case.
That's exactly right. Justin Quill, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thanks, Chris.